Imagine sitting on a video conference call with, your boss and your entire finance team.
Right.
You recognize their faces, their voices, even that really specific way your boss clears his throat before making a demand.
Yeah, we all know that sound.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when he asks you to initiate a confidential wire transfer for $25 million, you do it. I mean, why wouldn't you? You are looking right at him.
Of course.
Except, what if you were the only actual human being on that call? What if everyone else was literally a digital phantom?
It is the ultimate technological paradox of our era, honestly, because, for decades, we have been tricking to engineer the friction out of global communication.
Right, like making everything instant.
Exactly. We wanted to connect anyone, anywhere, instantly. But the moment we finally succeeded, we accidentally removed all the friction from deception, too.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are exploring a massive paradigm-altering shift that just occurred. We're talking about the release of Hagen Avatar V and our arrival at what the tech industry is calling the indistinguishability threshold in Q2 of 2026.
It's a big one.
It really is. And the stack of sources we have for you today is absolutely fascinating and honestly a little terrifying. We are looking through highly confidential corporate threat briefings, financial risk frameworks, and the latest cutting-edge forensic guides.
Yeah, it is a very sobering stack of documents. We are essentially looking at the exact mechanics of how digital reality is currently being manufactured.
Right.
And more importantly, how those exact same mechanisms are being weaponized against both corporations and everyday individuals.
Which is wild. So our mission today is to equip you with an insider's understanding of how these digital twins are completely reshaping global business overnight. Plus, why our own biological hardware, meaning our eyes and our ears, are suddenly our biggest security vulnerabilities.
They absolutely are.
Yeah. And we'll talk about how you can navigate a reality where the old adage, seeing is believing, has become a legitimately dangerous myth. Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can understand the threat, we have to understand the technology that started this revolution.
Right.
The catalyst. Exactly. And why businesses are adopting it at a completely unstoppable rate.
Well, to grasp the sheer scale of what is happening, we really have to look back at the architectural leap that occurred in April 2026 with Hagen's Avatar V.
Yeah.
Because prior to this release, if you wanted to create a synthetic video, what we used to call a deepfake, it relied on incredibly clunky frame-by-frame rendering.
Right, it was super tedious.
Very. It required massive server farms, heavy computing power, and it inherently linked the physical appearance of the person to their movement in that one specific video clip.
I remember reading about that old process. You basically had to sit in the studio under bright lights, reading a script for hours, just so the AI could learn how to move your mouth to match those specific words.
Yeah.
It was exhausting and expensive.
Exactly. But Avatar V completely threw out that architecture. It introduced this concept of a 15-second motor model.
Okay, so what does that actually mean?
Well, the system now only needs 15 seconds of casual smartphone video. That's it. From that tiny sample, it extracts over 10 million data points. And it isn't just taking a picture of your face, it is extracting your unique behavioral biometrics.
Wait, behavioral biometrics, how is that different from just like scanning my face?
A facial scan just maps the geometry of your nose and eyes. Behavioral biometrics map how you operate that geometry.
Right.
Yeah. The system is measuring how frequently you shift your gaze, the micro expressions that flash across your face between words, the asymmetric way your jaw moves when you pronounce certain vowels.
That's incredibly detailed.
It even catches the subtle way your shoulders shift when you take a breath.
So it's capturing my physical personality, not just my face. It's almost like creating a digital marionette. You only have to record the pulling of the strings once. And after that, you can change the puppet's clothes, drop it on a stage in Tokyo or Berlin, and have it speak flawless Japanese or German without ever going back into the studio.
What's fascinating here is the sheer scaling advantage this creates. That decoupling of motion from appearance is the holy grail for corporate communication.
I'll bet.
Because once the system has your permanent motor model, the AI can mathematically preserve the original tone and cadence of your voice across more than 175 different languages.
It's insane. The economics in these B2B case studies are just staggering. I was looking at the numbers for marketing campaigns, and traditional video production is basically dead.
Yeah, completely.
The cost of producing a single video asset has plummeted from over $2,000 down to just $230. And the production time. It collapsed from 3 days of shooting and editing to about 45 minutes of just typing text into a prompt.
And that speed is what unlocks hyper-personalization at scale. We actually saw that in the briefings with Trivago.
Oh, right, the localized ads.
Exactly. They used this technology to localize their television ads for 30 different international markets, cutting their localization costs by over 90%.
That's massive.
Corporate learning and development departments are doing the exact same thing. Instead of spending $50,000 to reshoot an entire HR training library when a policy changes, they just edit a text document.
Wow.
Yeah, they pay $2,000 in compute costs, and the digital avatar perfectly regenerates the new video.
And there was that one B2B sales campaign that just blew my mind. They showed an 18 times return on investment. They invested $11,000 and drove over $200,000 in revenue simply because the digital twin was rendering thousands of individualized videos.
Addressing every single sales prospect by their first name.
Yes, the economic incentives for adoption are absolute. When a technology allows a two-person startup to project the massive, multilingual, highly polished corporate presence of a Fortune 500 company, and it reduces operational friction by 99%, it isn't a choice anymore.
No, it becomes a competitive mandate for survival.
Right. But if marketers and HR departments have access to this frictionless scale, then so does everyone else. Which brings me to a darker thought. The exact features driving that massive return on investment, the flawless languages, the decoupled motion, the dirt cheap cost, those are the identical mechanisms being used to destroy global digital trust.
That is the core of the crisis right there. The scale that helps legitimate marketers is the exact same scale that empowers fraudsters. And the critical shift that makes this so dangerous today is the move from asynchronous threats to synchronous ones.
Meaning moving from recorded videos to live interactions.
Precisely. We are no longer just dealing with recorded deepfakes that you can watch, pause, analyze, and debunk on social media.
Right, the stuff we're used to.
Yeah. We have officially entered the era of the live avatar. These are zero latency, real-time video streams where the digital twin is listening, processing, and responding to you instantly on a live video chat.
Which brings us back to that terrifying heist I mentioned at the start of the deep dive. That actually happened at a multinational engineering firm called Arup in their Hong Kong office.
Yeah, it is basically the definitive warning case of this era.
Totally. A finance worker got a suspicious email from the CFO asking for a confidential transfer. The worker was skeptical, which is exactly what we are all trained to be.
Right.
So the attackers invited him to a multi-participant video conference to discuss it.
And this is where the mechanics of deception become so sophisticated. The employee joins the call, he sees the CFO, he sees his colleagues, he hears their voices, he recognizes their mannerisms.
Because it's a live avatar.
Exactly. The live avatars were rendering at a fidelity high enough to cross the indistinguishability threshold.
Yeah.
The attackers didn't need to hack the company's firewalls or steal passwords. They used the live avatars to manufacture an illusion of consensus.
And under the perceived authority of his boss and his peers just nodding along on the screen, that worker authorized 15 transactions, $25.6 million completely gone. Yeah. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. I know what you are thinking. I had the exact same thought when I was reading this. You're sitting there thinking, I'm not famous. I'm not a corporate CFO with millions in authorization power. Why would anyone target me?
It's a logical assumption.
Right. But the sources point out something chilling. Your 3-second TikTok video is more than enough to harvest your vocal cords and weaponize your voice against your own mother to induce panic.
That democratization of the threat is arguably the most alarming part of these threat briefings. The barrier to entry has completely collapsed. You do not need a server farm anymore.
Just a laptop.
Literally a single high-end consumer laptop and a $10 software subscription can clone a voice perfectly in seconds.
I saw the case study on Abigail, a retiree in California. She lost $81,000. She actually had to sell her home because of a romance scam. It is. She was having live, synchronous video calls with an avatar that looked exactly like a soap opera star she admired. The attackers slowly escalated the trust over months. And then there's the mother in Florida. She wired $15,000 instantly after picking up her cell phone and hearing a flawless clone of her daughter screaming for help.
Yeah.
How does our brain fall for this so easily when we consciously know scams exist?
Because the attackers are relying on a biological exploit. They bypass your logical skepticism by attacking your biological interface directly.
Wow.
They deliberately use urgency, demands for secrecy, and requests for non-standard payments like wire transfers or cryptocurrency. When a mother hears her child screaming, or an employee hears their boss demanding a secret transfer, the human brain triggers an immediate fight-or-flight response.
Right, you just stop thinking clearly.
Neurologically, your brain literally diverts processing power away from the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for logical verification, and redirects it toward immediate action. It is a biological hack.
And the scale of this hacking is industrialized. The documents track a 900% annual growth in deepfake attacks from 2023 to 2025.
Staggering numbers.
In Southeast Asia, organized scam compounds are running massive operations. They're actually hiring professional fraudsters, they call them AI models, and paying them $7,000 a month just to sit in a chair and have their faces digitally masked with stolen identities.
Unbelievable.
A single human operator can conduct 100 live deepfake video calls a day, running romance and crypto scams fluently across 4 different languages simultaneously.
It is a staggering level of weaponization, and it forces us into a very difficult corner. If our human intuition and our logic completely fail under that kind of emotional pressure, how do we actually spot a synthetic live avatar on a call?
That's the million-dollar question.
The answer is that we have to stop looking at the person and start looking at the physics.
Okay, I really want to dig into this because if I am on a Zoom call and I get a weird feeling, what am I actually supposed to be looking for? The forensic guides in our stack list 7 main indicators, but they all sound highly technical.
They are technical, but they're based on a very simple premise. While the AI is incredibly good at making a 2D likeness of a face, it struggles immensely with the microphysics of a 3D reality.
Okay.
For instance, researchers at the University of Buffalo found that ocular reflections are a major tell.
Ocular reflections, you mean the way light bounces off the eyeball?
Exactly. When you sit in a room, the light sources reflect in your pupils. In a deepfake, the AI is synthesizing the face independently of the physical room the caller is actually sitting in.
Oh, so the lighting doesn't match.
Right. So the way light bounces off the pupil often won't match between the left and right eye, or it won't match the ambient lighting of the background. They also exhibit what forensics call metronomic blinking.
Like a metronome.
Yes. Human blinking is irregular. It happens every 2 to 10 seconds based on moisture, thought patterns, stress.
Makes sense.
Deepfakes, however, often blink with a mechanical, rhythmic precision. Or, conversely, they might go a full minute without blinking at all because the training data lacked diverse blinking patterns.
I also read about something called peripheral artifacting, which just sounds like the AI getting confused by accessories.
That's a great way to put it. Watch what happens to rigid geometric objects like glasses, earrings, or headphone mics when the person turns their head quickly.
What happens?
The AI has trouble anchoring those static objects to a moving, morphing facial mesh, so the glasses might suddenly warp, or an earring might seem to momentarily stick to the cheek and stretch.
Creepy.
Very. Similarly, the lighting logic often fails. The shadows on the person's nose might suggest a light source on the left, while the background room is clearly lit from the right.
That makes sense. But the guides also recommend a few interactive tests you can perform live on the call. There's one called the Phonetic challenge. How does asking someone to say a specific word expose a deepfake?
It exploits a severe hardware bottleneck in current generative models. AI struggles to render the internal oral cavity, the teeth, the tongue, the inside of the lips.
Really?
Yeah. When a human pronounces labial consonants, specifically the letters M, F, and P, it requires precise lip-to-lip or tooth-to-lip closure. The AI's geometry engine gets confused by this interaction.
So if you ask them to say certain words.
Exactly. If you ask the avatar to say a word like Mississippi or puppy, the mouth will often blur, glitch, or appear semi-transparent for a fraction of a second.
And what about the hand pass test? The guide says you should ask the person to slowly wave their hand in front of their face. Why does that break the illusion?
It causes an occlusion error. The AI is essentially painting a 2D facial texture onto a live video feed. It doesn't actually know the 3D depth of the room.
Oh, I see.
So when a hand passes over the face, the AI gets confused about which layer belongs on top the face or the hand. This causes the digital facial features, like an eye or a mouth, to literally bleed or leak right through the palm of the person's hand.
Ugh, that is deeply unsettling to visualize.
It looks like a glitch in the Matrix.
Seriously. The last test mentioned is the unexpected pivot. The guide suggests asking a complete non sequitur, like suddenly asking about the weather on their commute, right in the middle of a serious finance discussion.
Right. Think of a live avatar system like a perfectly timed assembly line. The avatar is listening, processing, and generating responses.
Okay.
When you throw a sudden, unscripted question into the mix, it's like throwing a wrench into that assembly line. The AI has to stop the conveyor belt, process the unexpected audio, generate a new unscripted script, render the visual response, and restart the belt.
That takes time.
Exactly. Even with massive high-end GPUs, this process creates a 100 to 300 millisecond computational lag. That flatline gap, that unnatural pause before they react, is your proof of synthesis.
So what does this all mean? Because I'm reading the technical horizons in these same documents, and they suggest these visual glitches are going to be patched out by next year. Aren't all these hand-pass tests and phonetic challenges just a temporary Band-Aid?
This raises an important question, and the hard truth is yes. This detection window is rapidly closing. The threat briefings emphasize that the technology is patching its visual bugs far faster than human perception can evolve.
So we're running out of time.
We are. By 2027 or 2028, the industry is introducing technologies like 3D Gaussian splatting and reverse physics engines.
3D Gaussian splatting. That sounds like a made-up sci-fi term. What does that actually do?
Think of traditional 3D rendering like building a face out of flat, rigid Lego bricks. These are called polygons. It's clunky, and the seams show when you move.
Right.
Gaussian splatting is more like painting with dynamic overlapping watercolors that naturally blend, flow, and react perfectly to light in real time.
Wow.
It requires very little computing power but creates a flawless, photorealistic 3D environment. Once these reverse physics engines are standard on a single GPU, it mathematically eliminates the latency gaps, the occlusion errors, and that waxy skin look.
So the glitches will just be gone.
Entirely. The machine will be rendering the digital fabric folding with perfect gravity as the avatar moves, with absolutely zero discernible lag.
Which means looking for glitches will be entirely pointless. If our eyes and ears are completely obsolete, how do we even answer the phone anymore without getting robbed?
This is exactly why our entire defensive posture has to undergo a fundamental shift. We must transition entirely away from technical observation and move towards strict behavioral protocols.
Okay, so a new system.
Yes. If you cannot trust the video stream, you must trust the system surrounding it. We are moving into what cybersecurity experts call zero-trust architecture.
The briefings lay out some very specific protocols for this. The absolute baseline they push is the rule of pause.
A critical rule.
If you get an urgent request for funds, sensitive data, or secrecy, even if it looks and sounds exactly like your boss, you do not act on it. You hang up, and you manually call back a verified internal number that you already have saved.
Yes, out-of-band verification.
And you never, ever trust caller ID, because spoofing a phone number takes about 3 seconds.
That out-of-band verification is absolutely critical for businesses. But we also need to establish non-digital authentication in our personal lives.
Right.
Every corporate team, and frankly, every family, needs to establish a safe word, something completely random like Blue Alaska.
Blue Alaska.
And the critical rule is that this word must never be typed into an email, sent via text, or saved in a password manager. If someone calls you in a panic, claiming to be your child or your spouse, and they cannot provide that verbal safe word, you must immediately flag the interaction as hostile.
Reading that really shook me. The idea that I need a safe word just to know if I'm actually talking to my own mother.
It's the new reality.
The guides also push for some massive digital hygiene reform. One simple, immediate step they recommend: delete your custom voicemail greetings.
Yes, everyone should do this today.
Go into your phone right now and revert it to the automated robot voice from your carrier. Because as we discussed, it only takes 3 seconds of your voice saying, "Hi, you've reached my phone," leave a message, for an attacker to scrape that audio and map your vocal cords.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what we are witnessing is the total collapse of our traditional systems of authentication, even at the highest levels of society.
Right, like the legal system.
Yes. The U.S. Federal Rules of Evidence, specifically Rules 901 and 902, are currently buckling under this weight. Historically, the legal standard was simple. If a witness was personally familiar with the defendant's voice, they could listen to an audio recording and authenticate it in court.
But because AI now accurately mimics breathing, cadence, and tone from just a tiny audio sample, that biological witness familiarity is mathematically obsolete.
Exactly.
The stack highlights the US v. Refit case, where the defense simply claimed a video of the defendant was a deepfake.
Yep.
It created this massive evidentiary deadlock because the prosecutors didn't have the forensic tools to definitively prove the video was real. The burden of proof just shattered.
And lawmakers are scrambling to catch up to this reality. 47 out of 50 U.S. states have already passed some form of deepfake legislation.
That's a fast response.
It is. Internationally, the European Union's AI Act is now mandating that AI providers embed invisible watermarks into their outputs and requiring platforms to actively detect synthetic content. In the U.S., New York passed the Digital Replica Law, which requires clear written consent and contracts for the use of anyone's digital likeness, a move specifically driven to protect the entertainment industry.
We're also seeing movement at the federal level. For instance, it's worth noting the Federal Take It Down Act, which mandates platform removal of non-consensual deepfakes, was signed into law by President Trump in May 2025.
Right.
But the underlying issue remains unsolved. Whether it's legislation or platform policies like Hagen's Terms of Service prohibiting impersonation, these rules are purely retroactive. The detection, the platform bans, the legal punishment, it all happens after the reputational or financial damage is already done.
Exactly. The burden of proof has entirely shifted onto the victim. Proactive defense is now the sole responsibility of the individual and the corporation. And that harsh reality is already creating a massive shockwave through the labor market.
Oh, absolutely.
The entire concept of proof of presence is gone, and HR departments suddenly find themselves on the new front line of corporate security.
The numbers on the labor impact are just stunning.
Yeah.
By the end of 2026, research shows that 204,000 entertainment jobs, which is roughly 20% of the entire industry, are negatively impacted, facing displacement or role merging due to AI efficiency.
It's a huge disruption.
Corporate shifts are accelerating too. We saw the software company Atlassian fire 1,600 traditional staff while simultaneously opening up 800 AI-focused positions.
And when those companies open those remote positions, they are running headfirst into synthetic identity packets. The FBI has actually tracked hundreds of cases where U.S. companies accidentally hired North Korean operatives.
Which is insane. How does a North Korean operative get hired at a U.S. tech company?
They combine stolen personally identifiable information with AI-generated identity documents to create a flawless fake persona. Then, they use these deepfake live avatars to bypass live HR video interviews.
So the recruiter is completely fooled.
Right. The recruiter thinks they are talking to a senior developer in Ohio. The avatar passes the technical screens, they get hired, they get mailed a company laptop, and suddenly a malicious state actor has authorized credentialed access to internal corporate systems.
It is a total infiltration crisis. When a deepfake can perfectly mimic a senior developer on a live Zoom interview, the entire concept of remote hiring and remote work in general has to be completely re-architected.
Ultimately, the transition we are discussing today is a philosophical one just as much as a technical one. We have spent our entire human evolution believing that seeing and hearing someone was the ultimate, undeniable proof of their reality. The indistinguishability threshold means that ancient heuristic is officially dead.
We've covered a massive amount of ground today on this deep dive. We started by exploring how Hagen Avatar V's 15-second motor model completely revolutionized corporate communication, turning multilingual video production into a frictionless, scalable software asset. But we also saw how that exact same frictionless technology birthed an era where 5% of employees can't detect a cloned voice, where live avatars were bypassing our brain's logic to steal millions in real time, and where we are forced to adopt safe words just to safely answer the phone for our own families.
The overarching lesson here is the necessary shift in our human posture. For decades, the mantra of the digital age was trust, but verify. Today, that posture is a critical vulnerability. The new operational baseline for every interaction has to be verify, then trust.
Verify, then trust. And that leaves us with one final provocative thought to mull over. If our digital footprints, our casual public TikToks, our Instagram videos, our custom voicemail greetings are the exact ammunition that adversaries use to clone and exploit us, will the ultimate status symbol of the future be having absolutely no digital footprint at all? Will we actually view posting a casual video of ourselves online the same way we view posting our social security number on a billboard today? We engineered the perfect digital mirror, but staring into it might be the most dangerous thing we can do. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.